I never thought my sister would be the one to betray me. But even more than that, I never thought my parents would let it happen. Diane and I were never close. Growing up, we lived in the same house but seemed to come from different worlds. I was the quiet one, more book than lipstick, more chores than charm. Diane? She had a magnetic kind of chaos about her. She could lie with a smile and get away with anything. Teachers forgave her. Our parents forgave her. I just learned to stay out of the way. Still, when Grandma Rose passed away suddenly last fall, I hoped maybe we'd finally find some common ground. We both loved her, even if Diane never visited as much as she promised she would. Grandma was the only one in the family who treated me and Diane equally. She didn't sugarcoat Diane's behavior, and she always encouraged me to speak up for myself. Her passing was quick. A stroke, no hospital goodbyes, no final words. Just a phone call from a nurse and a funeral we planned in 3 days. I remember how Diane arrived late, wearing heels too high for the muddy ground, sunglasses too large for a cloudy day. I had done all the planning, the catering, the priest, the flowers. She showed up for photos. After the service, when everyone had left and the chairs were being stacked, Diane leaned against the railing on Grandma's porch and said, "It's weird, isn't it? No one our age left except us." I was caught off guard. A rare moment of connection, maybe. I nodded. "We should take care of what's left. The house, the savings, all of it." I said, "We will. Together." She smiled. I should have known better. Weeks passed. I stayed busy managing Grandma's paperwork. She had no children but our father, and he had appointed me as co-executor along with Diane. That alone had been a surprise. Grandma knew we weren't close, but I guess she believed in fairness. Then, things started disappearing. First, small things. A painting from the hallway, an antique brooch. Then came a phone call from the bank. One of the accounts had been closed, the funds transferred to a private account I didn't recognize. When I asked Diane about it, she acted surprised. "I thought you did that. I figured we were splitting everything anyway." I started to suspect more, but I didn't have proof. Not yet. I went to my parents thinking they'd help me get to the bottom of it. My mother was folding towels in the laundry room. My father sat watching TV, barely looked up. They didn't even seem angry. Not at Diane. "Your grandmother always said Diane would need more help than you," Mom said, smoothing a sheet with a snap. "And anyway, Maggie, you don't even have kids. What would you use the money for?" It wasn't just the words. It was the way they said them. So casual, so final. That night, I sat in my car, hands frozen on the steering wheel for almost an hour. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was planning. It wasn't about the money. I kept telling myself that. It was about principle, about respect, about Grandma Rose, who worked hard her entire life so her final wishes would mean something. So her voice wouldn't be silenced just because she was gone. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every time I looked at the numbers, the documents, the missing items, it felt like someone was trying to erase me from my own family's story. I started combing through Grandma's files. She was old-fashioned. Paper everything, meticulously filed. Receipts, letters, bank printouts. She had a pale yellow folder marked "Will Final Copy" tucked in the back of her wardrobe behind her old sewing machine. It confirmed everything I already knew. The house and belongings were to be divided equally between Diane and me. There was even a handwritten note in Grandma's familiar script. "I want both girls to feel loved and secure. No favorites." So why did it feel like I was the only one left fighting for that promise? I went back to the bank, the one that had called me about the closed account. I met with a woman named Carla who remembered the call. She was hesitant to give details, citing privacy rules, until I showed her the copy of the will and the executor appointment form. Her expression shifted when she realized I wasn't just poking around. I was supposed to be involved. "I shouldn't say much," Carla said carefully. "But this account was closed with both executors' signatures. At least, it looks like that." She slid the form across the desk. My stomach dropped. It was Diane's signature, obviously. And next to it, a signature that looked like mine. But it wasn't. Not quite. The loops were wrong, the spacing, even the slant. "I never signed this," I said. Carla lowered her voice. "You might want to speak to a legal professional. This kind of thing, it's serious." I thanked her and took a photo of the form. My hands were shaking. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, the house quiet except for the tick of the hallway clock. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I kept replaying our mother's words in my mind. What would you use the money for? As if my life didn't justify fairness. I didn't even want the money. Not really. I had a job. I paid my rent. I managed. But I was exhausted from being overlooked. From being called too sensitive. From watching Diane charm her way through every crisis while I was told to be understanding, to be the bigger person, to just let things go. This time, I couldn't. The next morning, I drove to the attorney who had drafted Grandma's will. His office was in a small red brick building next to a dentist's clinic. His name was Robert Sheldon, and he looked startled when I walked in with a folder thick with documents. He read through everything in silence, flipping slowly through each paper, occasionally nodding or frowning. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me, his voice calm but heavy. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Margaret," he said. "What you're describing, it's forgery, fraud." "I just want to understand why," I whispered. "Why would she do this? Grandma wanted it to be equal. It wasn't even a lot of money in the grand scheme of things." "She did it because she thought she could get away with it," Robert said, "and because no one ever stopped her before." I left with more questions than answers, but something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about what Diane had done. It was about what I was going to do next. I didn't go back to my parents' house for a week. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I wasn't sure I'd be able to hold back everything that had built up inside me. I kept thinking about Grandma Rose, how she used to say, "Blood makes you family, but truth makes you safe." I used to think that was just one of her old sayings. Now it was starting to sound like a warning I'd ignored. One Saturday morning, I finally drove over. The same house I'd helped paint 10 summers ago, the same kitchen I used to scrub after dinner, now felt like a stranger's place. My mother was folding napkins at the dining table. My father was reading the paper. Both looked up when I walked in, as if I'd shown up for coffee rather than to question the very foundation of our relationship. I didn't sit down. "I need to ask you both something," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "And I want the truth this time, all of it." They exchanged a glance. My mother gave a soft sigh, the kind she always used when she was tired of a subject before it had even begun. "Did you know Diane forged my signature?" I asked. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother didn't blink. "She told us you'd agreed," she said simply. "She told you," I repeated, stunned. "And that was enough? You didn't think to ask me directly?" "Maggie," my father said carefully, "your sister was under pressure. She needed help. It wasn't a lot of money, and we thought maybe you were just being particular again." "Particular?" My voice cracked. "You think being angry that someone committed fraud in my name is being particular?" There was silence. "I've always been the one who showed up," I continued, my voice trembling. "When Grandma needed groceries, I went. When you had your surgery, Mom, I was the one who took care of things. When Diane moved to LA and couldn't even be bothered to call, I was still here defending her. Why? Why do you keep choosing her over me?" My mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were dry but cold. "Because you never needed us the way she did." It landed like a punch. My father tried to soften it. "You were always the strong one, Margaret. You never asked for anything. Diane, she's always been a little lost." "So you reward recklessness and punish responsibility?" My mother's expression tightened. "Don't twist our words. We did what we thought was best for both of you." I took a shaky breath. "Did you know Grandma left us everything equally?" "She mentioned it," my father said. "Then how could you stand by and watch one of us steal from the other?" "She was family," my mother said simply, as if that explained everything. I left without another word. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel again, but this time, not from confusion, this time from clarity. They knew. Maybe not every detail, but enough. Enough to intervene, enough to ask questions. But they chose silence. They chose Diane. And now I was choosing something else. That afternoon, I emailed Robert Sheldon, Grandma's lawyer. "Proceed with what we discussed," I wrote. "I'm ready." I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. I wanted my name cleared. And I wanted every document that bore my forged signature to be exposed. Because if my family thought silence could bury justice, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Diane had always lived in the moment, but now that she had access to a chunk of Grandma's money, she was throwing herself into chaos at full speed. It didn't take long for word to spread in our small town. People saw her at the dealership first, test driving a luxury SUV she absolutely didn't need. Then it was the boutique clothing store, where she bought bags and coats with tags that cost more than most people's rent. And finally, the worst of it, she listed Grandma's antique bedroom set on an online marketplace. I only found out because an old friend from church texted me a screenshot. The title read, "Vintage mahogany set, lightly used, must go fast." I nearly dropped my phone. Those weren't just any pieces. That was the set Grandma had taken with her when she moved into her final home. I remember helping her dust the headboard every spring. She used to tell me, a woman's room should always reflect her dignity, even when no one's watching. And Diane was selling it for quick cash, just like that. I opened the listing and stared at the photos. My throat tightened. The vanity mirror was cracked, something I knew hadn't been there before. The drawers were missing their brass handles. The description didn't even mention that it had belonged to our grandmother. I called her. She didn't pick up, so I drove over. Her apartment, once modest, was now stuffed with things she didn't need. Imported lamps, a designer rug rolled out beneath a new marble table, still covered in plastic wrap. A man I didn't recognize answered the door, shirtless and holding a can of beer. He looked at me like I was an inconvenience. "Diane," I called over his shoulder, "we need to talk." She appeared in a new robe. Silk, dark red, barefoot, a glass of something in her hand. "Maggie," she smiled. "You look stressed. Want a drink?" "Is that the bedroom set?" I asked, pointing past her to the stacked boxes and disassembled furniture in the hallway. "Was," she shrugged. "It's going tomorrow." I stared at her. "Why are you doing this?" She leaned against the doorframe, utterly relaxed. "Because I can. I need a fresh start. I've been stuck for years." "You stole from Grandma's estate, and now you're just tossing her life away like it meant nothing." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. You think I'm the only one who bends the rules in this family? You just didn't know about it before. That's your problem. You always think if something's written down, it has to mean something." It did mean something to her, and it means something to me. She didn't answer that, just drained the rest of her glass and smirked. "You always were the sentimental one." When I left, I sat in my car for a long time, watching the lights inside her apartment flicker as someone, probably that man, moved past the curtains. I thought about how easily Diane discarded things, people, memories. She had done it our whole lives. But this time, it wasn't just recklessness. This time it was criminal, and it was going to stop. The next day, I met with Robert again. I handed him every document I'd collected, the forged signature, the banking records, even screenshots of the furniture listing. He scanned through it all, nodding grimly. "She's not going to take this seriously until she's made to." "And my parents?" I asked. He paused. "They're not legally responsible, unless we can prove they encouraged or facilitated it knowingly. But their testimony, especially if they deny knowledge, could complicate things." "They won't help me," I said. "But I'm doing this anyway." He nodded. "Then we'll file. You'll get your day in court." I hadn't expected my parents to take my side, but I hadn't expected them to be proud of Diane either. After my meeting with Robert, I tried not to look back. The case would move forward slowly. Court filings, affidavits, notices. I busied myself with work and stayed away from family, trying to protect what peace I had left. But peace doesn't last when your family refuses to acknowledge the storm. It was my aunt, a cousin of my mother's, who mentioned it offhand at a grocery store of all places. "Your parents were at lunch with Diane last week," she said. "She looked like a movie star. Your mother said Diane might let them stay in the cabin once it's fully hers." Isn't that wonderful? I felt my mouth go dry. The cabin? Grandma Rose's lake cabin wasn't just a piece of property. It was where she took us in the summer, where she made pancakes on a stove that took 10 minutes to heat, where she taught me to fish and told me stories about her childhood. It was also clearly listed in the will as a shared asset, 50-50ths between Diane and me. I drove straight to my parents' house. My mother was watering the houseplants, humming to herself. My father was in the garage, fiddling with his tools. "What's this about Diane giving you the cabin?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. My mother blinked. "She mentioned it last week. She said once it's officially hers, we could use it for the summer." "It's not officially hers," I said. "It's ours. She forged my name. You know that." "And you're still accepting gifts from her?" My mother tilted her head, almost smiling. "Maybe she just wants to make things right. She's trying to be generous." I took a step back. "No, she's manipulating you. She's using stolen money and stolen property to buy your love." My father appeared in the doorway. "Watch your tone." "No," I said, louder than I meant to. "You should both be ashamed. She's tearing apart everything Grandma built, and you're letting her because it's easier than facing the truth." My mother's face turned cold. "You've always been so moral, Margaret, so judgmental. You think just because you follow rules, you're better than everyone." "I think following the rules means something, especially when someone's been robbed." "You weren't robbed," my father cut in. "You still have your job, your apartment, your savings. Your sister needed help. You're just angry because she got ahead." "Got ahead by committing a crime," I snapped, "and you're cheering her on." They didn't deny it. In fact, my mother just muttered, "She said she might help us pay off our mortgage if things go well. It's not like you've ever offered." I couldn't breathe for a moment. I had offered, many times. I had picked up prescriptions, bought groceries, covered their heating bill 2 winters ago without ever asking for thanks. But I didn't dangle it like a prize. I didn't ask for loyalty in exchange. Diane had learned how to buy affection, and they were selling theirs for cheap. I walked out without another word. That night, I sat with Robert again. We went over timelines, verified documents, and drafted a motion to present in court. "You understand once this is filed, it's public," he said. "It won't just be about Diane. Your parents will be pulled into it too, even if not directly." "I understand," I said. "Let the world see. I'm not the one who should be ashamed." I think there's a moment in every betrayal where something inside you goes quiet. Not because you've given up, but because the fight has changed. It's no longer about emotion. It's about clarity. That's where I was when Robert called to say the court had accepted our filing. The paperwork had gone through, a date had been set. Diane would be served within the week. I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt a cold, steady sense of purpose. "She may try to play innocent," Robert warned. "Act like she didn't understand what she was doing. But the documents don't lie. The forged signature, the account closures, the asset transfers. All of it builds a pattern." "She won't take it seriously until she's forced to," I said. "That's fine. I'm ready." But what I wasn't ready for was how quickly the silence turned into noise. The day after the paperwork was served, I received a call at work from an unknown number. It was my mother. "You've embarrassed this family," she hissed before I could say anything. "Dragging us into court, over some furniture, over a few dollars?" I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. "It's not about the money," I said. "It's about what's right." "No, Margaret," she snapped. "It's about you not being able to let go. You always had to be the one who was right, the one who kept records. You're not better than the rest of us, and now you've declared war on your own sister." I hung up before she could say anything else. That night, I sat across from Robert again. I told him everything, the call, my parents' reaction, the pressure. He nodded. "They'll likely testify for her if they're called. We'll prepare for that." "What if the judge sides with her?" I asked. "What if all this just turns into another dismissal?" "We'll appeal," he said. "If the evidence is there, and it is, we'll take it as far as we need to." There was something deeply reassuring about his confidence. Calm, methodical. I clung to it. But Diane wasn't staying quiet either. A few days later, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Just one line. "You're going to regret this." I knew it was her. The tone was too familiar, too smug. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Robert, who made note of it for the file. Then came the social media posts. Subtle at first, Diane posing in designer clothes with captions like, "Success is the best revenge," or a shot of her and my parents at a brunch with the caption, "Real family always sticks together." I didn't comment. I didn't post back. I didn't even speak to anyone outside of work and Robert. But inside, something solidified. I had spent most of my life shrinking myself to avoid making people uncomfortable. Diane had always pushed and pushed, knowing I would eventually give in. But not this time. When the pretrial hearing date arrived, I stood in front of the courthouse, clutching my folder of documents. I didn't wear anything flashy, just a plain navy dress, flats, and my grandmother's pearl brooch, not for luck, for strength. Diane arrived 10 minutes late in a white pantsuit and sunglasses. She didn't even glance at me. Her lawyer trailed behind her, clearly younger and far less prepared than Robert. We didn't speak inside the courtroom. The judge reviewed the evidence, asked preliminary questions, and set the timeline for a formal hearing. But it was enough. The look on Diane's face, when the judge said the word forgery aloud, shifted for the first time. She didn't smile. She didn't smirk. She looked scared. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something real. Not vengeance. Power. It was after the pretrial hearing that the real backlash began. If I had hoped that finally seeing the legal system acknowledge Diane's wrongdoing would wake my parents up, make them pause, even quietly admit they had misjudged, then I was more naive than I thought. Instead, they turned on me. It started with small things. My father stopped answering my calls entirely. My mother returned a birthday card I'd sent with a note that read, "We don't need reminders from traitors." I could have ignored it, but it didn't stop. They showed up at my apartment building unannounced one Saturday morning. I was barely awake when the buzzer rang. I opened the door only because I thought it might be a delivery. My mother stormed in first, eyes sharp and cold. My father followed, his face flushed. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stunned. "You need to stop this nonsense," my mother snapped. "Right now, before you ruin what's left of this family." "Ruin it?" I laughed bitterly. "Diane's the one who's been selling off Grandma's belongings like junkyard trash. She forged legal documents. What am I ruining exactly? Your illusion?" "You've never understood loyalty," my father said. "You think you're so much better because you follow rules, but family isn't about rules." "Then what is it about?" I asked. "Covering up fraud? Staying silent while Diane dismantles everything Grandma left behind?" "She gave us part of the money, you know," my mother said suddenly. "Enough to help with the mortgage. After everything we did for you, all you've ever done is bring shame into this house." It felt like being slapped. "You accepted stolen money," I said quietly. "You stood there while she sold the antique mirror Grandma gave me when I turned 16. You didn't even ask where it all went." "She's moving forward," my father barked. "She's successful now. She's helping us." "She's destroying what little we had left," I said. "She sold the furniture, the jewelry, even the paintings. The cabin is next. Do you honestly think she's going to keep a single thing sacred?" They didn't answer. "I tried to do this quietly," I continued. "I gave everyone the chance to fix it. You made your choices. So did I." My mother turned to go, but not before spitting out, "You're a disgrace, Margaret, and I hope this court case humiliates you." I stood frozen long after they left. Part of me felt like that little girl again, the one who got blamed when Diane broke a window or skipped school. But the woman I am now, she didn't flinch as easily. They had made it clear, I was no longer family in their eyes, not because I lied or stole or betrayed, but because I told the truth. That evening, I returned to Grandma's old house, the one Diane had been living in and slowly emptying. I still had a key, though I didn't know how much longer it would work. She wasn't home. Inside, it was barely recognizable. The dining room was stripped, the walls bare, the grandfather clock was gone. I stood in the middle of the living room, remembering where the fireplace poker set used to sit, the place Grandma would rest her knitting basket. And then I saw it. On the floor, under a pile of plastic wrap, Grandma's recipe box. I knelt down, brushing off dust and packaging. It had nearly been thrown out. She'd kept it since the 1950s, handwritten cards in her perfect cursive, some stained with sauce, others crinkled with age. I held it to my chest as if she could still feel it. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty house, "but I'm not letting her erase you." The day of the trial came faster than I expected. It was a gray morning. Rain smeared across the courthouse windows, the kind of drizzle that clung to everything and made the air feel heavier. Robert met me at the entrance, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. Inside, the courtroom was almost empty. Just a few onlookers, a bailiff and the judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Diane was already seated at the defendant's table, looking polished but stiff. Her lawyer, still green, flipped through papers nervously. My parents weren't there. Whether by choice or shame, I didn't know. The hearing began with formalities, confirmation of filings, review of exhibits. Then Robert stood and presented our case. He didn't speak with theatrics. No dramatic pauses, just facts. Clear, precise, undeniable. The forged signature, the unauthorized account closures, the sale of assets not yet legally distributed, and photos, so many photos, of the items Diane had sold, many of them listed with time-stamped ads, bank transfers linked directly to her account. When Diane's lawyer spoke, he tried to paint her as confused, overwhelmed by grief, acting under misunderstood intentions. But the judge wasn't swayed. And then came Diane's turn to speak. She rose slowly, cleared her throat, and said, "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought Margaret wouldn't care. She always had her own life." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The judge turned to her. "Miss Langley, intent does not erase responsibility. You signed documents under your sister's name. You liquidated estate property without legal authority. This is not confusion. This is fraud." Diane looked down at her shoes. The judgment was delivered that same day. The judge ruled in my favor. She ordered Diane to return all unsold items belonging to the estate or compensate their fair market value in full. Any funds removed from accounts were to be repaid, with interest. And perhaps most satisfying of all, the judge explicitly referred the matter of the forged signature to the district attorney for potential criminal investigation. It was over. I had won. When I walked out of that courtroom, the air felt different, lighter. Not because I was happy. This wasn't a victory that brought celebration, but it brought justice. It brought truth. That afternoon, Robert and I sat in his office to finalize the post-trial paperwork. He looked at me and said, "You did something most people are too afraid to do. You stood up to your own blood, and you didn't blink." "I did blink," I said. "I just didn't stop walking." I went home and opened the box I'd taken from Grandma's house. Inside the recipe box, tucked behind a card for her lemon pie, I found something I hadn't noticed before. An envelope. My name written on the front in her looping handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Margaret, I know the world is not always fair and family not always kind. But I see you. I've always seen you. You carry things others would rather forget, and you do it with grace. If it ever comes down to truth or silence, choose truth, even if you stand alone." Grandma Rose. I read it again. And again. I didn't feel alone anymore. In the days after the trial, things were quiet. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace, but from exhaustion. Diane disappeared from town. No farewell message, no apology, just gone. Her social media accounts were wiped clean. Someone mentioned she might have moved in with a friend out of state, trying to escape the embarrassment. The legal process hadn't ended completely. There were still repayments to arrange, assets to recover, but the worst was over. And then, a week later, my parents came to my door. I hesitated before opening it. Part of me still hoped it would be someone else, but it wasn't. My father looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders slumped, his hands jammed into his coat pockets like he was unsure of what to do with them. My mother didn't speak right away. "We wanted to talk," she said, eyes low. I let them in, not because I was ready, but because it felt like the right thing to do. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd eaten breakfast at as a child, the same table where they had once scolded me for being too strict with Diane. Now, neither of them looked angry. They just looked tired. "You were right," my mother finally said. Her voice cracked. I stayed quiet. "We didn't want to believe it," she continued. "We thought we were protecting her, but all we did was let her destroy everything." My father nodded. "We thought we were helping the weaker child. We thought you didn't need us, but we should have seen what was happening." My hands trembled slightly. "You knew she forged my signature. You knew she was selling Grandma's things. We made excuses, he admitted. That's not the same as not knowing. I waited a long moment. And now? We're sorry, my mother said, tears forming. I know it doesn't change what we said, or what we didn't do, but I hope it means something. It did mean something, but not everything. There's nothing left of Grandma's house, I said. The furniture's gone, the art, the cabin's in probate now. You stood by while she dismantled all of it. My mother looked at me. She took our memories, but you... Her voice broke again. You're the one who tried to protect them. That hit deeper than I expected. I didn't forgive them instantly. That would come slowly, if at all. But I saw something in their eyes I hadn't seen in months. Humility, shame, and maybe the first flickers of understanding. After they left, I stood at the window and watched them walk to their car. They looked older, smaller than they had ever seemed to me. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the abandoned daughter. I felt like the one who had survived them. I returned to my desk and opened the folder of estate documents. I placed the letter from Grandma on top, then closed the file. I was done. Not with remembering, but with fighting. A few weeks later, I walked into the local community center and donated the recipe box to a women's archive project, a quiet tribute to the woman who had shaped me more than anyone else ever could. Her story, her handwriting, her strength, now part of a larger legacy. On the way home, I stopped by the lake. The cabin stood empty now, pending resolution of ownership, but I didn't go inside. I just stood on the dock where Grandma once held my hand and told me to trust the water, even if it looked cold. I breathed deeply. The wind was sharp, but it didn't hurt. I was still here.